Shovel Knight is a game that you should absolutely play. This is known. I talked about it nearly 3 years ago, and as the years have gone on, that's remained unchanged. Plague of Shadows was the first big update to Shovel Knight, and while it was interesting to play through the game again with both a new character and a new perspective, it was ultimately frustrating to play with Plague Knight, and the best parts of what made Shovel Knight such a hit were lost in the process. It was hard to really complain about Plague of Shadows though, since it was, in and of itself, free DLC. The latest in the trilogy of forthcoming DLC is Specter of Torment. With it not only comes a new character and adventure to play through, but a price increase as well. Granted, if you already owned Shovel Knight before Specter of Torment's release on the Switch, and now subsequently other platforms, then there's nothing to worry about. But for those who slept on the original for one reason or another, the $10 price hike means Shovel Knight, now known as Shovel Knight Treasure Trove, has more content than ever before, and presumably, Specter of Torment adds a large part to that value. Unlike Plague of Shadows, which ran alongside it, Specter of Torment is a tale that happens prior to the events of the original Shovel Knight. Specter Knight is recruited, so to speak, by the Enchantress. His goal is to round up the Order of No Quarter, with the purpose of gaining power to an amulet that will give him his life back. Without giving too much away, Specter of Torment tells a much deeper tale than the other two installments. Yacht Club Games brings a story that weaves in different characters that were originally bit players and gives them more depth. The story itself is tragic and rather dark. There are lighthearted moments in the tower where you'll do most of your shopping and spend time between levels, but the main narrative doesn't shy away from what's at stake. Similar to the story, the majority of the graphics have been overhauled to a degree for Specter of Torment. While most of Shovel Knight was bright, vibrant colors, Specter of Torment favors dark grays and harsh reds to reflect its more serious tone. There's a contrast from the previous ROMs. Where Shovel Knight was more adventurous and Plague Knight was more mischievous, Specter Knight is very sinister. It's reflected well within each level, though plenty remains the same, such as enemies and the knights themselves. Plenty of new characters and returning ones have new animations that are easily the most expressive of the series to date. My personal favorite is Red, the new merchant who trades red skulls for curios. For someone with no face, Red is very good about expressing his disappointment at each skull you bring him that isn't the one he's searching for. And like everything else, the music has also taken a turn. Most of the songs within the game are the same ones we've heard from the original campaign, but with a more menacing edge to them. A change of arrangement here and a different instrument there makes a world of difference, which is no surprise coming from composer Jake Kaufman. There's not a whole lot else to say that we haven't covered already. The sound is just as good as before with a perfect blend of nostalgia while also sounding fresh and new. Plague of Shadows was essentially a new character with minor tweaks to the game to retrofit the campaign to Plague Knight. One would assume Specter of Torment would follow this formula. It would be wrong. Specter Knight has a large array of moves to help him traverse the land. He's able to run and jump up walls, chain homing attacks, and has an arsenal of different curios to collect to give him different powers. Specter Knight is insanely fun to play. Zipping across the screen to chain combos is immensely satisfying, but at the same time, Specter of Torment does not allow players to abuse the powers they're given. The homing attack will only work when the indicator appears and while Shovel Knight is airborne. On top of that, spamming it is liable to get you killed. The trajectory which Specter Knight is launched depends entirely on the angle he's attacking from, which leads to some clever secrets and level design. The entire game has been recreated with Specter Knight's moveset in mind. You'll spend quite a bit of time in the air, homing in on different enemies and wall jumping to climb areas faster. While Plague of Shadows felt like a small character upgrade, Specter of Torment is essentially an entirely new game. Certain parts of levels are repeated, but they're woven in so well with the new that you'll hardly notice it in the first place. What's clear from the level design alone is how much Yacht Club has learned since the original Shovel Knight. While Plague Knight was frustrating to use, Specter Knight is easy to pick up and go. The fluid movement and control is there and never feels overwhelming or unfair. Collecting the red skulls to gain curios, like I'd mentioned earlier, is rewarding as all hell. Each level has roughly 10 different skulls hidden throughout. Some in plain sight, others require a bit more exploring and trickery to get. You'll then exchange these with red for different upgrades that can be used in exchange for the darkness meter. Now what Specter of Torment does, and I gotta say this is pretty smart, is require players to perform a small trial that only allows Specter Knight to use the curios he just purchased. I found myself using these a lot more since I had a good idea as to what they did. Some are situational, others aren't, but requiring players to use these for a brief instant without a huge tutorial being shoved down your throat was oddly invigorating. Similar to Shovel Knight itself, Specter of Torment doesn't have a whole lot going against it. Granted, it's a fairly short romp, something you can easily beat in an afternoon. Really, the biggest problem of Specter of Torment is the difficulty, or rather, lack thereof. Shovel Knight maintained a decent difficulty level throughout, despite all the upgrades you could gather. In Specter of Torment, the upgrades you can buy were created with more novice players in mind. Granted, they are optional and useful, but they're almost too useful. One of the first curios you can purchase uses some of Specter Knight's darkness to recover some of his health. Any darkness or will upgrades, the DLC's version of magic and health, you missed can be purchased for a nominal fee, and everything you could possibly need is condensed into the tower itself. There's no overworld to speak of, but rather Specter Knight travels to each level from the tower. The red skulls you gain only need to be collected once. Even if you die, they stay in your inventory. Once again, the only punishment is your gold, which, if truly needed, can be grinded for in earlier stages. There's nothing inherently wrong with any of that per se, it's certainly convenient to say the least, but the difficulty takes a turn downward as the game goes on, meaning you'll likely have more trouble with the first boss than you do with the last. But that doesn't change the fact that Specter Knight is so fun to play. Yacht Club has given far more than a small character upgrade here. Instead, it's a full-fledged new story to play through, and it's their most engaging yet. Shovel Knight has been well worth the price of entry since its release, and to say that Specter of Torment is definitely worth the 10 extra bucks is an understatement. Whereas Plague of Shadows failed, Specter of Torment absolutely delivers. It's a game that successfully builds upon the original, creating something that's just as good, if not a little bit better in the process.